Here we have Democrats and we have Democrats. Like we have the people who have to run as Democrat to have a chance to win. No, I'm talking about like progressives who have to run as a Democrat to have a chance, but then we have the like neoliberal Rom Democrats. So it's almost like a microcosm of what's happening in this country. We have like the huge divide between Republicans and Democrats on the national scale. Here we have a huge divide between the Rom Democrats, the Pritzker Democrats, and then we have, folks like us who might know people who run as a Democrat, or if I ever ran for office, I guess I would have to run as a Democrat if I wanted to win, but whatever. Yeah, so the policies that we're suffering from here in Chicago are neoliberal policies. So these are folks like Rahm and then his cronies, or Madigan and then his cronies. Madigan, he's in charge of the Democratic Party in Illinois. They're all profiting off of the corruption. A lot of them are property tax appeals lawyers, coincidentally. So that's just something I wanted to play off of.
But it's also what we're seeing nationally, because I'm attacked like nobody's business on Twitter. Shut up and be against Trump. And I'm like, but that's not going to change anything. Yes, Trump is awful, but you're going to get rid of Trump and put who in office? Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand. So they're not as viscerally as vile, but in practice, I mean, either take your broccoli or your Brussels sprouts as far as policies. Do you think that progressive wing that she's talking about is making inroads here in Chicago? I mean, obviously you ran for Congress. It was a difficult race, but you ran and you definitely organized well. What are your thoughts on? Because like when I think Mike Madigan, I'm thinking like that quintessential guy in the back room smoking cigars and just rigging the whole thing. So how do you really put a dent in that kind of corruption that's been going on here since the 20th century?
Right. Yeah, I mean, to me, it consistently harks back to, the importance of education, educating our voting base, educating our community members, because if you look at, again, we talked about it, I think in the past, our past election cycle, I think the average age of voters was 45. And for me, this is just my opinion, this is an I statement, I don't think the older generation is going to be the generation that saves us. Just like the March for Our Lives, it's the youth that we have to listen to, and it's the youth that are going to move us forward in progression. Because right now, what's happening with this neoliberal base is you maintain status quo. And for some people with privilege, status quo is fine because they're living okay. They don't have the struggles that many of us are suffering with. They're still middle class, upper middle class. They still have a job. Their children are going to decent schools. So they don't necessarily see the importance of we need to move forward now because it's inevitable. If you maintain status quo, you're not going to move forward, but it's inevitable that you're going to regress, that you're going to move backwards. It's just part of the game that we play. So for me in Chicago, being in the military and then traveling around helping other candidates that are part of Justice Democrats, Brand New Congress, that are progressive, and I don't know if you all can speak to it, but Chicago's like a different animal to me. Like it's a different breed of corruption, political corruption in particular in Chicago. Right. I mean, it's really different. And I mean, even if you look at how our districts are structured due to gerrymandering, even trying to community outreach to certain districts in certain areas, certain wards is even interesting because you have aldermen that literally are neighbors that don't work together, don't collaborate, aren't communicating. You have congressional representatives that aren't in the community, aren't pushing for change, aren't working with the aldermen or alderwomen, to make a difference. So it's just a different level of corruption here. So I think we're definitely moving forward, but I think it's going to take more time than you see in other areas, like a New York or, like a West Virginia, so on and so forth, because it's just so deep. It's rooted in the fabric of our communities, this level of corruption. And the neoliberals, that base, they want to hold on to power. They truly do. And, one more thing I want to say is, I think we have to, as people, we have to ask ourselves, how are we valued? Because we talked about J.B. Pritzker earlier. And honestly, I find myself, I guess, in a conundrum of sorts because, of course, I don't support Rauner. I'm definitely not a Rauner fan. But as a black man, I could say with confidence that I didn't see JB not one time step in our communities and really invest. That's just me. really knock on doors and really talk to people and really see what I did see him do was pay for yard signs, pay for, radio spots where he had a black mother talk and, represent him and so on and so forth. So is that how our votes are valued? We have candidates out here giving money away. Like that's,
Can I expand on that after, and then I'll pass to you, Erica. So I'm going to be the optimist here. Because there's a deep, as a community organizer, my background is in gun violence prevention and criminal justice reform. Grew up in Austin. Fred Hampton was from Austin, right? The Black Panther Party was formed. The Illinois chapter was formed there. Chicago is a blue-collared, grassroots organizing city. The top tier, the people we see, that top tier, they don't represent the city of Chicago. And to be honest, they don't represent the state of Illinois, because that's what Illinois is. It's quintessential Midwestern values. I think that as we look at ways, I think that the wave is happening, right? Because we have things like No Cop Academy arising. We have groups like BYP 100, Asada's Daughters, people who are like, oh, there's lead in the water? Okay, let's find a way to get that on the ballot to take care of that. There's so many grassroots programs and organizations that are sprouting up that I think that it's going to take the courage of more people stepping away from campaigns, getting in the campaign, so not only educating them what they're voting for up and down the ballot, but they need to get on the ballot. They need to be the true representation of their communities. We can talk about Rahm Emanuel all day long. His agenda does not move in City Hall without City Council. So the people who are being elected to represent these neighborhoods, and that's another thing, Chicago is a city of neighborhoods, that are representing these neighborhoods are voting with him 90% of the time. So I think that there's several things that we have to do, and when we speak about nationally in the Democratic Party, we have to start amongst ourselves amplifying and edifying the voices of people who can build policy out. I'm a policy person, build policy out through different gender lens, different, are we looking through a queer lens? Are we looking through a feminist lens? Are we looking through a racial lens? And the problem is we're not. So we can push as many great candidates out and we can have them win, but when they actually get in those chambers, are they organizing in a grassroots way, in the chambers and outside the chambers, and bringing that perspective back to the policy? And so that's how I focus as a Democrat, right? Leaning more towards that progressive stance. It's not just about great candidates. We don't need more poster children. We need renegades who are gonna write great policy. So that's just kind of my stance on it.
Because right now the corporations are right now.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's what I wanted to touch on. I think one of the things that we can connect to this is what's happening with our millennial cohorts and young folk, right? Is that in campaigns right now, the MO is money, right? But do we actually look into what that money is used for? What is the money actually used for? The money is used to influence the public opinion. And there's a couple ways it's used. Number one, multiple ads, so you see that person's name. No knock on prison, but I was on Spotify, okay, trying to enjoy my song, and I was like, oh my God, where'd this ad come from? Like, he's on Spotify, all Snapchat, my God. So it's like, that's what that money goes for. But the other thing it goes for is consulting. It goes for consulting. And I'm just want to make this very clear. In our communities where jobs are lacking, opportunity is lacking, how many of us don't think much deeper than applauding our family member who gets a job on a Clinton campaign or who gets a job doing that stuff, and we ready to clap because half of us did nothing? But in the midst of our clapping, because we don't have a lot of opportunities, we are clapping for our own destruction. We are clapping for that talented family member in front of us to use those neutral talents and gifts that could be used for good or bad or whatever. We are applauding the use of those talents and gifts that our community has grown through struggle to be used for things that could detrimentally take us in the wrong direction because of our lack. Because we want to applaud each other. We want to see each other make it. We want to see the few of us that somehow get our head above water. So in the midst of that, there's such a conundrum because now millennials are at that age where we are those consultant. Like some of us are those consultant age now. We are those people. And so they know, number one, millennials is broke out here, okay? And they offering stuff, you know what I'm saying? And my caution to the millennial generation is do not let them make you their millennial firewall. Do not let them take your arts and talents and gifts and things that came out of this struggle and become the thing that protects them from their BS. That should be the very thing that challenges it, and it may take some sacrifice at first. And that's the other thing. If your 5-year plan is going to make you more successful in 5 years than your community, that's the wrong 5-year plan, period. And so I think it's time for us to start looking deeper and be real about the fact that it's not going to be easy. It's going to take some sacrifices in the front end, but in the end, it will benefit all of our communities. And that's what I think we got to think about.